Hello. Today we're going to talk about Chapter 1 in the book, Get Your Michigan Driver's License Back. We're jumping around in the book to talk about things that you need to know if you're trying to get your driver's license back after having lost it because of drinking and driving or drug driving related offenses. And today we're going to talk about specifically Form 258, Secretary of State Form 258. You can find Secretary of State's Form 257 and 258 online, and it will give you the information that you need to know in order to proceed with the effort to get your license back. 257 is the part that you fill out, and we'll talk about that next time. But today we're going to talk about the part that I fill out, which is Form 258. I always recommend to people, please do not fill out Form 257 or get your letters or anything else until you see me, and we have a chance to say what needs to be in those letters, what needs to be on that form, because all of your evidence has to match up. The letters that you get of support, my evaluation, and Form 257, as well as what you say at the hearing. And typically people don't know everything that's on the form. They might know most of the information. Some of it is on your Department of Motor Vehicle license. Some of it is in other places that you might have kept or you might not have kept. But if it's a question of estimating, then we have to have the same estimate on your evaluation and at the hearing itself, or we're going to have a problem. And if the estimates conflict with the actual record, we're going to have a problem. So it's better not to get started on that until we have a chance to do our job, and then you can go from there and use that as a base. Form 258 is a two-page form in PDF that you can find on the internet. However, I do it in Word format, and the reason I do it in Word format is simply that it's easier to read. It is all the same information. The Secretary of State accepts it. They're familiar with my work, but it allows me to also extend any parts that I think are relevant, and I find it very important to talk about the things that you've done right and to spend as much time on that as we want to. I can't do that if I'm filling out a two-page form handwritten. So my reports are 6 pages and they're typewritten. They're much easier to read and they're much more professionally done. The process is a lot more complicated than it used to be. It gets more complicated all the time. It used to be just this 2-page form, and you would go in for your license, and if you satisfied them that you had been sober for at least a year, they would give you your license back. Then it became extended by, they would give you a temporary for a year. Along with that, they started to require a drug screen. And then it became a year with a breathalyzer on your car before you would get your full license back. So it's a lot more complicated than it used to be, and it's worth knowing what we're doing and to approach this in a systematic way. It's very important that you get somebody good to do this, somebody who's just doing these as part of their practice and doesn't really know what the Secretary of State requires is likely to miss something or not understand what it is that they have to do in order for you to have your best chance of getting your license back. The first thing they ask for are demographics, things like name, date of birth, driver's license number, mailing address, and telephone number. That's pretty self-explanatory. Then they ask a list of all your driving convictions under the influence of alcohol or under the influence of a substance, and all your non-driving substance-related convictions. Do not try to snow them on this. Sometimes clients will leave this information off. If you go to the hearing and you had an MIP when you were a kid, a minor in possession of alcohol or other substance, and it's not on your substance use evaluation, you will be denied. If you had a drug trafficking conviction that you don't think relates at all because it was not a driving conviction, and you don't list it, you will be denied. It's very important that anything that happened that you were arrested for while you were either under the influence of a substance or that involves substances such as trafficking or possession of a substance has to be on your substance use evaluation. They will have it in front of them. They will have your driving record, they will have your criminal record. If there's something there that you didn't list, a domestic violence while you were under the influence of alcohol, for example, then they know that you're not being fully forthcoming with them. I always tell people, if they say, well, this conviction was expunged or something like that, I say, well, if they have it and you don't list it, it's going to be a problem. On the other hand, if you list it and they don't have it, then you're being candid, you're being honest and open, and that will not hurt you. So, very important to list all your convictions for any substance-related matter. The next thing that you do is you sign an authorization and release. Now, what this does is authorizes me to send your information and your evaluation to the Secretary of State. I, however, will never do that because I want you to know exactly what's in that report. There are no secrets between you and me. And if the evaluation is good enough to send in, you look it over and decide if you want to send it in. If you don't feel that it's good enough to send in, then you have that option of not sending it in and waiting, for example, if you have not been sober long enough, waiting until you have been sober long enough to send in an evaluation that will have a better chance of getting you a license. Not everybody is ready at the time they come to me. So it is important that you know you should have a year of sobriety. You must have a year of sobriety. And that you have to have your ducks in a row, and that you must be doing something that shows a change in lifestyle. Not everybody's involved in Alcoholics Anonymous. It's a myth that you have to be involved in AA to get your license back. But you do have to be able to show improvement in your lifestyle because they know that if you are sober that you are improving, that your life is improving, and that you will be able to show that. Then the next thing they ask for is your lifetime treatment history for alcohol and other drug abuse. They ask for inpatient, outpatient therapy, any kind of counseling or education classes that you've attended, and that could be anything from rehab to attending a Mothers Against Drunk Driving class. And we want to list everything that you've done to address the problem. Some people have done a lot of counseling, they haven't done much AA. Well, you've done something. Some people haven't done much counseling, but they've done a lot of AA. Then we'll get to that. That's listed in a separate place. But it really is very important that you are able to, with some degree of accuracy, tell me what it is that you have done by way of counseling, inpatient or outpatient, or classes that you've attended. And it doesn't matter if they were of your own initiative or if they were ordered by the court. And you don't have to tell me that it's ordered by the court. The important thing is that you did it, and hopefully that you got something out of it. And that's what the message that you want to give to the hearing officer, what you got out of it. Because he has to be convinced, or she has to be convinced, that you have indeed made a change. If you don't accept the fact that you've got a problem, and if you're not able to see that and show that you have made a change, then you're not going to be able to convince the hearing officer that you're safe to drive. The next thing they ask for is lifetime support group history. Now, if you are involved in Alcoholics Anonymous, that's a positive, very positive thing as far as the hearing officers are concerned, because they like to see that you are actively doing something, and 12-step groups have some proven effectiveness. Arguments to the contrary notwithstanding, it's generally accepted that AA is a very effective method of treating substance abuse for those who actively participate and take it seriously. So if you're going to AA, that's a good thing. However, it's a two-edged sword, because if you're saying that you're in AA, they expect you to know something about AA. They expect you to know who the founders were, Bill W. and Dr. Bob. They expect you to know the Serenity Prayer, which is, God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. They expect you to know the 12 steps of AA, or if not all 12 steps, they at least expect you to know what AA includes, such as the admission of a problem, the acceptance of a higher power, the inventory of problems and wrongs that you've done, the willingness to make amends, and the ability to help others. You should be able to know at least what that entails. However, you don't have to be involved in AA. You may be involved in another self-help group. Unfortunately, other self-help groups are not as available as AA. So you may go to, for example, a group such as Alcoholics for Christ that is focused on recovery, but from a Christian perspective. Or you may be involved in the Women for Sobriety, which is an organization specifically for the concerns of women who are in recovery. That's fine. Whatever you're doing that is helping you to remain abstinent is terrific. Some people are not involved in a self-help group. Some people may be, for example, very active in their church, and they find that that is their support. Some other people have strong family support. So it isn't essential that you are involved in Alcoholics Anonymous or a similar type of group. If you are, we will emphasize it. If you're not, we'll emphasize what it is that you are doing. Again, I always tell people, make a good case for what you are doing. Don't try to make a bad case for what you're not doing. The next thing they ask for is some type of testing instrument. And they ask to include the actual instrument that you've used. I use the Michigan Substance Abuse Screening Test, which is my own variation on the Michigan Alcohol Screening Test, which has been around forever. And the reason I do that is because there are more and more people with issues of substance abuse that involve substances other than alcohol, such as marijuana, opiates. Both legal and illegal substances, by the way, can be a problem. We have an epidemic of legal drug abuse in the country. And the hearing officers are very aware of that, and it will be picked up on any drug screens, on the drug screen that we do. So, it's very important that we cover these other substances. And the Michigan Substance Abuse Screening Test is 24 questions. We're going to go into that in detail at another time and why it's particularly useful. But let me just say at this time, it does two things. It provides a test, which the hearing officers like to see, that says where you are basically in the process of addiction and recovery. In addition to providing a test, tells me where you are in the process of your acceptance of your condition. I sometimes say when we're starting out, later on we're going to talk about your recovery and all the things that you're doing right and how all the ways in which your life has improved. However, right now I want you to own the problem. If you don't show them that you own a problem, they're not going to believe that you have a solution. So be real candid, be real honest, fall on your sword, and admit that you screwed up. This is very important. If you are constantly telling them one of two messages, either I'm not that bad, or I wasn't that bad, or I don't like this process and I feel like I've done my time without a license and you should give it back to me. If you express one of those two attitudes, then it's going to be very hard for you to get your license back, because they know that in order to have a solution, you have to first accept that you have a problem. After the testing instrument, the next thing that they ask for are diagnostic impressions. The drug test in here before I give the diagnostic impressions, because I want to see a clean drug screen before I go and address the fact that I believe that you're sober. I think that is the proper order. But in this diagnostic impression, they want to know whether or not you are a substance abuser or substance dependent. They also want to know if you have any other mental health issues, because they're concerned about the possibility, for example, if you have chronic depression and take an antidepressant for that, that it might possibly trigger a relapse into active substance abuse. So if you are taking any medications by a doctor, then it's important that you get a letter from that doctor or a form that is called a DI-4P from your doctor or mental health professional that says that your mental health issues are under control and that you are not likely to relapse because of your condition. Alcohol dependence and other, and they might have also a co-occurring diagnosis of marijuana dependence or marijuana abuse or other substance abuse. It is important that we have a diagnosis that includes every substance that you've used or abused, because they want to be sure that that's been considered by the evaluator. So don't think that other substances are irrelevant or that we don't have to address them, because they will be brought out at the hearing, and if they're not addressed here, it's going to be a problem for you. Then they also ask for your lifetime abstinence period. And what they're looking at here are your relapses. If you have a history of relapse, then you have to explain why this particular time you're going to remain permanently abstinent. And that is what they expect. They do not expect you to get your license back and start drinking socially again. They do not believe that that's feasible. The general thinking in the treatment field is that once you have a problem with substances, you cannot use a substance safely again. So they want to be sure that you're going to be permanently abstinent. It's their job to protect the streets and the people on the streets from people that drink and drive. And if they're not convinced that you're going to be sober, they're not going to give you your license back. So it's very important that you tell them what's different than this time than the times before that you relapse, because typically people will have a period of sobriety, maybe just after their first DUI because they were required to by the court, and you relapse because you really didn't think it was a problem at that time. But then you picked up another DUI, you got the message, okay, now without a license, it's hard to get to work, it's hard to have a life, I better address this problem if I want to get back into the mainstream. Again, you have to have at least a year of sobriety to qualify for a driver's license. And it doesn't generally look good if you've had long periods of sobriety after which you've relapsed. A period of chronic relapse does not help your case, even though you may feel like it was a good thing that you were sober for 5 years before. They're going to look at it and they're going to say, okay, you were sober for 5 years and relapsed. Now you've only been sober for 3 years. How do we know you're not going to relapse again? Very important to address that issue. What are you doing differently this time that's going to ensure sobriety? Then they ask for the prognosis. Prognosis offers the following choices: poor, guarded, fair, good, and excellent. If I think you have a good chance of staying sober, I will typically give you a good prognosis, your first evaluation. And if you're able to complete a year successfully driving on a breathalyzer, which they almost always require, the next time you go back, I will give you an excellent prognosis. But you must have a good or excellent prognosis in most cases to get your license back. The case that you have to make is a clear and convincing case. That's what the standard of proof is, clear and convincing evidence that you are going to remain abstinent and that you are not going to drive drunk. Then it asks for a continuum of care. Hopefully you are continuing to do the things that work for you. If that's Alcoholics Anonymous, I'm going to recommend you continue going to Alcoholics Anonymous. If you're still in therapy, I'm going to recommend you continue in therapy. If you are an active church member and you go to church 3 times a week, I'm going to recommend you continue doing that. Whatever it is that is your way of recovery, I'm going to recommend that you continue doing. It is important that you continue to do whatever it is that you are doing that is working for you, because you're going to have to go back in another year and reapply for your full license. Typically the first time they give you a restricted license for a year, and then you have to reapply for a full license. So if you quit doing everything that you're doing that worked for you, then it's not going to look good for you the next time you go back and you're applying for a full license. It's important that you continue positive patterns. You know, under the prognosis, we talk about all the ways in which your life has changed. You know, you got a better job, you have healthier relationships, you get along better with other people, maybe you become a father or a mother, you have more money in your pocket, you're spending your money more wisely, maybe you bought a house. You're going to be able to show progress in a number of ways. But you're progressing because you're doing things differently. You're staying away from the old drinking friends or the old drugging friends. You have to keep doing those things under continuum of care. It's important that you continue to do the things that are working for you, that are ensuring that you are going to maintain abstinence and not be a danger to others on the road. And if you can convince the hearing officer of all of these things, then you have a good chance to get your license back. These people are reasonable, they're fair in most cases, and if you make your case, you will have a good chance of getting your license. Thank you.